Hi all, let's continue looking at Nakamura at the Rapid Open at the London Chess Classic. In round 9 he was playing another Super Grandmaster, Fabiano Caruana, playing with the white pieces. Caruana prior to this round had been doing really well, beating 3 GMs in a row at one point, Dragon Camille, Garwin Jones, David Howe, and then drawing with Anish Giri, then beating Luke McShane, so quite a good run for this round 9 clash. So Fabiano Caruana actually outrating Nakamura 2-8-3-9. Kicked off with E4, Nakamura 2-7, 6-7 according to this, but these might be based on actual FIDE ratings, not the Rapid. So Nakamura played the Sicilian defense, knight F3, knight C6, and we saw now bishop B5. So not going into the main Sicilian Sveshnikov lines, but this is very, very trendy in recent years, this move, bishop b5. It's a very popular alternative to d4. So bishop b5, and Nakamura reacts with e6. After castles, knight ge7. White plays now d4, so changing the nature of the position, opening up now with bishop on b5. Interesting. C takes, knight takes, knight g6. So looking at some dark squares, the bishop is actually at the moment still free to go to c5, doesn't have to close up with d6 just yet. Bishop e2, and in fact the bishop does use c5 here. Bishop c5, knight drops back, bishop b6. So this is potentially quite useful, this pin. It's inhibiting f4 anyway from white. c4, Maroczy bind setup, d6. Is d6 going to be a problem on this file? Can it be ganged up on? Knight c3. Well, immediately knight b5 is useful here. a6 stops that. What about this bishop though? That's a problem piece. King h1. So that f4 is now potentially on the cards. And we see now e5 from Nakamura, compromising the d5 square a little bit, and black's clearly playing on the dark squares more now, and white will be trying to play on the light squares, trying to get rid of this guy, this bishop on c8. So the square strategy for both sides is kind of set a little bit more as soon as black's played e5. Knight d5, the bishop is preserved here. There's also, I mean, immediately taking here is a problem, so the bishop is preserved anyway away from that. Bishop g4, so the light square play to get rid of this guy, to weaken these light squares more. Black castles, white takes, rook takes. Slightly better for white from an engine perspective here. Bishop e3. Does this arguably weaken white on the dark squares a little bit? If we just have a look at this move, I think that's one of the top engine choices anyway. Also, you know, black is a little bit weak on the dark squares potentially as well, so it's not so clear cut. But bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, not avoiding the double pawns, and keeping an iron grip on d5. Knight ge7. Okay, it looks as though maybe in the future f5 might be an idea. Rook c1, a5. Now a4 to dislodge this knight is potentially useful. White plays c5, d takes, knight takes. You'll note here that black seems to have at least the d4 square to look forward to, and he actually uses that right now. Knight d4 in this position. So what is going on here? What happens, for example, if knight takes b7? This wasn't played, but queen d3 was played. But if knight takes b7, queen b6, where's the knight going? That would be awkward and embarrassing. There's no place for the knight. So we see queen d3, queen d6, knight goes back here, a4, knight takes d4, queen takes. White keeps the queens on, holding on to the e4 pawn with this move, queen b1. Seems a bit passive, but white has a very nicely placed knight here, a little bit more aggressive than this knight. Otherwise symmetrical pawn structure. Queen d2, black has the more active queen it seems, but it's kicked. Queen b4, now invading rook, rook d7. Knight c6, the knight looks heading for d4. a3, queen b3. Rook d3, kicking the queen again. And again, knight d5. Queen goes to b5. Rook c1. Rook cd8 from Nakamura. f5 might be an interesting idea at some point to try and undermine that knight, try and get some f-file play. b4 now. Okay, so here if en passant then rook takes b3 is nice for white. Okay, so after b4 we have knight d4, and this is very interesting now, this next move. After rook c5 the queen finds a safe place, believe it or not, on e8. It's a top engine move, going back to e8. Let's see this for a moment. If queen here, maybe f4, trying to undermine this guy. This is an advantage for white. So Nakamura's choice seems strange, but f4 here, knight e6. This is possible. In this position, let's just have a quick check on this. f4 here, knight e6. There's knight f6, splat, winning the queen. So the queen's out of harm's way, and you know f4 is a positional idea to undermine d4. So queen e8 handles that well. Not only that, now after queen d1, black activates a bit with f5. E takes, rook takes. This is a bit more less stable, a bit more wobbly, that knight. f3, rook f8. But yeah, there's a nice laid pawn here. You'd think white's better. The engine prefers white at this point. Pressure on this guy. b6, rook c7. Now here the knight is actually on a4, so that's protected. b5, rook c5, rook c8. After knight e4, Nakamura takes on c5. Yeah, white's still a little bit better here. Black is structurally a little bit worse. Queen f7, but it seems as though black has some possibilities here, including that b3 square. This is an advanced pawn. Can he do something with this b3? h3, queen f5. Queen's also active now on this diagonal. h6, queen d2, rook d8. It's interesting that maybe queen c2 is potentially annoying. We see rook e4 blocking the queen out of that diagonal. King h7. For the moment, still, from an engine point of view, white's still slightly better here after all this. Queen f2, rook d5. But now, after rook d5, it's interesting because this advanced pawn is actually made use of here with rook d5, because it seems as though knight b3 is actually an interesting move for black to try and wrench out a passed pawn. Can he really do this based on that knight, which is not totally ideal on c5? It's a bit of a tactical target that this is demonstrating, this knight b3. I mean, what does white actually do about the knight here? If he plays something like knight d3, knight takes f3, and this would be really unpleasant. Just taking here, we end up taking on f3 or a3. Really unpleasant for white. So what does the knight actually do on c5? It seems a bit stranded out there. In fact, okay, engine moves suggest white should be equal here with various queen moves, but they all seem a bit passive. Queen f1, queen e3, queen a2, a bit lame. Queen d2. It's all as if you know, white's just trying to keep a secure position. But here it seems the blunder at move 45. Instead of this, king h2 was played, which is a slight positional blunder. It seems
as though with knight b3, black is exerting pressure and has a small advantage.
If we look at some other options here at this point, like Queen E3, that stops Knight B3. We're guarding against Knight B3 here. We can just take that and take, no problem. So yeah, Queen E3, Queen E1, Queen E1. You know, if Knight B3 here, take Queen B1. That position might be safe enough. Just about this position here. This position here is safe enough for quality. But yeah, this slightly changes the picture. This move, King H2 after Knight B3 here. It's interesting, wrenching a pass pawn. So Knight takes B3 was played. What one else? It's tricky. The engine suggestion is Rook G4 here. So Knight takes E4, and if it takes Rook takes E5, where Black is slightly better still. Black's got a bit more pressure. But that was the move suggested, Rook G4 here. Other moves are slightly more difficult. Queen E1, take here, takes. Yeah, Black's pawn up. Yeah. So yeah, it's a tricky position after this Knight B3. But Knight takes B3 was played, and then the evaluation shift is clearly in Black's favour. Black is now threatening things like Rook D4 to try and get that diagonal for Queen C2 and then B2. Queen E3 was played here. This probably doesn't help too much after B2. Queen E1, and now Black is absolutely crushing White with this next move. Can you spot it? If I give you 5 seconds. Rook D4, it's really quite powerful here. White is tied down to this passed pawn. White's busted. He actually resigned here. If he, say, plays Queen B1, then Rook takes here. And this doesn't help White. If takes, we have the check. And then we have Queen C1 check. Winning easily. So the passed pawn is triumphing here. Yeah, this is over. Yes, after Rook D4, yeah, what does White actually do? This pawn is just too dangerous. So Nakamura magically kind of got something out of the position here. Based, if we just look earlier, you know, he was slightly worse for quite a while. But you know, his moves, I think if we look at how that pawn got to A4 earlier, it was from the tempo gaining. Let's have a quick look at this. Pawn coming to A4 earlier, and then he had to secure it down with B5 later. But what he got out of that was this Knight B3 resource. So here he protected A4, but we have the Knight B3 resource. What's interesting is that Knight on C5 as a tactical target for this Knight B3 to be a little bit more effective. So here is where White's going onto the slippery slope of defeat with King H2. He has to start playing quite accurately just to hold equality, and this doesn't help. This doesn't help, certainly, giving Black the passed pawn. I mean, other moves though. Now let's imagine Black wasn't given the passed pawn. King H1. This is better for Black apparently, with various ideas. Rook D2 is one. Supports Rook D2. If say here Rook A2, it seems, you know, White is faced now with horrible things like Rook A1. If here Queen G6, here Rook takes A3, we've got a passed pawn here. So yeah, maybe Black gets a passed pawn in any case, but it'll be sterner resistance than the game, and it gets it's a bit hairy actually, this variation. But yeah, Black's got more chances here. It seems technically the engine likes Black a little bit more. Maybe it should be equal actually. This. So this was on King H1. Just playing King H1 here is interesting. So that was with Rook D2. But maybe there's, you know, it seems as though yeah. Yeah, giving Black the passed pawn is fatal. Basically, this seems to be a fatal mistake. But yeah, Nakamura, to his credit, you know, encouraged that kind of thing to happen. That master of disaster. Nakamura. So comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.